Kate Miller is back. She was with us last week, and she is a spiritual practitioner, and she teaches yoga and meditation. And she and I have been very good friends for a very long time, and she'll be continuing to support this conversation and also continuing on through after this series. So we'll have, we're developing a grief ministry for anybody who's going through grief. It's looking like it might be a once a month or once a quarter offering. So I'm just grateful to know that we're maturing into a community that really does care for each other, especially when they need it most. And I'll pass it to you, Kate.
So I'm going to start with meditation. So I ask you, I'm sure you're all seated at this point, but allow yourself to feel the support of your seat beneath you. Take a nice breath, full breath. Connect with your breathing as if it were the wind. And let your mind be like the sky. And allow these words of John O'Donohue to just fall over you. May you know that absence is full of tender presence, and that nothing is ever lost or forgotten. May the absences in your life be full of eternal echo. May you sense around you the secret elsewhere which holds the presences that have left your life. May you be generous in your embrace of loss. May the soar of your grief turn into a well of seamless presence. May your compassion reach out to the ones we never hear from, and may you have the courage to speak out for the excluded ones. May you become the gracious, passionate subject of your own life. May you be embraced by God, in whom dawn and twilight are one. And may your longing inhabit its deepest dreams within the shelter of the great belonging. So take another breath. Grief, it's a big topic and it's a messy topic. And so it's okay to get messy because artists are messy. And that's a good thing because they create and we're all creators. So facing grief. The face of grief could actually be each one of us. We all have been touched by it. When something ceases to exist, grief is there. A loved one, a pet, a marriage, which we call divorce, a relationship, which we call a breakup, a job loss, the loss of sense of purpose or role in life. Children are launched, they go off to college, a retirement takes place. The loss of a dream or ideal dies. Our own capabilities and health. Grief is a process to be honored. At this moment in time, we are living under a sorrowful eclipse that feels very heavy. There's a palpable sense of collective grief. The COVID-19 death rate worldwide is nearly 2 million. 2 million. There's an economic uncertainty across the world. Everyone has lost their normal routine of work, school, worship, community, social connection, shared meals, physical touch. There has been a revealing of the brokenness of varied systems of our society: healthcare, elder care, education, economic. Layered on top of all of that is a deep political divide that is going on within our country, which threatens the state of our democracy, as well as severing relationships within our community and our families. Layered on that are the sorrows of ecological destruction of the planet and historic trauma. This land is scarred with deep sorrows. We are all immersed in multi-textured, collective grief. Take a breath. A quote from grief expert David Kessler. We are all dealing with the death of the world that we knew. We don't know how this is going to change, but it will. We'll come out the other side of it. It's not forever. And just like every other loss, we didn't know what we had until it's gone. We have these feelings, we have to feel them, and we have to feel the grief. Even in the best of times, grief can be overwhelming. With COVID-19, the grieving process has been completely altered. Many people have not been able to say goodbye to loved ones, being left to grieve alone at a time when they need the comfort of others most. Finding closure has been difficult because there's no wakes or funerals or memorials. There's no one to sit with to share the burden of grief. Grief must be witnessed, which means someone to sit with and be fully present to the magnitude of the loss without making any attempts to lessen it or reframe it or to point out the silver linings. Grief is personal. Each experience of grief that we've had in our lives is completely different and unique. Much depends on the relationship and circumstances. Was there unfinished business? Was something left unsaid? What was the state of mind or being of the person that was dying? Were we involved with their physical care? Was there trauma associated with it? What burdens have been left behind to the survivors? Despite our best efforts, we've never learned to predict it nor prepare for grief. It's important to remember that all loss is valid. We're not here to compare them. There's no hierarchy of grief. And remember, the worst loss is always your loss. When grief strikes, it leads into a valley where life is forever altered and beginnings have to be carved out afresh. Recognizing that there's no way to replace the core elements of your life that are no longer here with you. It leaves us feeling exposed, vulnerable, and unsure of where we're headed. It feels as though there's a vacuum of air around us that steals the ability to take a deep breath. Within the idea of lost is the feeling of being alone. When one says, I have lost, are they meaning, I am lost? Whether it's temporarily lost or permanently lost is up to us. The task of grieving is finding our place in the world again. Who am I if not Peter's wife? Who am I if not Billy's father? Who am I if not the manager of the restaurant? Who am I if not the owner of that house? Who am I if not Pam's friend? The issues of ownership and responsibility are intrinsic in the idea of lost. To lose something, it has to be yours. And if it was yours and you lost it, were you irresponsible? When someone or something or some moment is lost, we lose our ability to sense it. Our first reaction to loss is visceral and convulsive, a gut punch. I remember explicitly opening up a piece of mail, and I think it was a legal document, and it listed me, not as Peter's wife, but as widow. I It felt like I got punched in the gut. I keeled over. What we can no longer see, hear, touch, the mind can't comprehend. There's a torrent of emotion. Amidst the pain and guilt and anger and loss, we hear the voice of our own soul wandering, lost beyond our reach. When we stop, sit, listen, we acknowledge not only our loss, but the fact that we are lost. Grief moves through the body. Yeah, we can intellectualize things, but believe me, form craves form. We often hear grief referred to as waves, but I've come to better understand it as the undercurrent of grief. You know, how many times have we gone swimming and people are like, be cautious of the undertow. Grief comes on unexpectedly and it can pull us under and out into the depths. Focusing on what is not possible, what is absent in our lives as opposed to what is present, keeps us caught in a cycle of fear and despair, and often manifests itself as anger and blame. To take my fear and despair and make it into someone else's fault disempowers me. By turning that fear and despair inward, also disempowers me. So the only choice remaining is to meet my fear and despair honestly, with as much support from the world around me as I can call upon. Grief is not something that we overcome. Time does not heal. Time passes. Healing is an active process. When we feel the woundings of the heart, soul, and mind, it feels as though we've been torn open. Eventually, the wound closes. But what's been closed up inside? Have we healed or closed up with anger, fear, resentment, and doubt inside? Healing and cure are not synonymous. Cure is medical. Healing is a spiritual idea. Healing is an active process that happens for us. It's the gift we give ourselves when we decide to stay open to that which has broken us. Has my heart broken open wider to include more life, to love larger? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Swiss-American psychiatrist who pioneered providing counseling to the terminally ill in the 1960s, wrote the groundbreaking book on death and dying in 1969. And she identified 5 stages of the dying, which were then adapted to grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Please know that these are not linear stages. Some people don't go through all of them. Some may go through a couple, one. Some may be stuck in one for a long time. They provide a general process. They describe, not prescribe. David Kessler, who worked with Kubler-Ross for many years and co-authored a couple books with her, for years had felt that there had to be something else that came after acceptance. And he defined the 6th stage of grief as finding meaning. And he wrote a book that came out in 2019, which was even after he had processed the death of his 21-year-old son. A different perspective in the healing process is that grief will always be present. There will never be a day when we wake up and forget the missing elements of our lives. Eventually, the pain that accompanies this remembering will dull and be less acute when it arises. Ultimately, we'll find other outlets for which we can pour our devotion and our energy. Perhaps one of the most unfair aspects of grief is that we are forced to change the direction of our love. We're forced to shift the fundamental part of who we are at the very moment we are not ready and are unprepared. Loving a person who can no longer receive it is heartbreaking. How do we respond to someone who is actively in grief? There's no right way to respond. Good intentions may drive the cliche statements we make in response to grief, but they're not an authentic answer. We often hear the "I'm sorry for your loss," but that statement actually helps us create a distance and buffer our own fear of the same grief happening to us. It's a way to subconsciously separate what is the most important to us from the devastation that someone else is experiencing. Though in reality, any loss is collective loss because it reminds us deeply of the fragility surrounding us here on earth. So here are a few different options. I know there's nothing I can say right now to make things better, but I also know that having someone to talk to at times like this is really important. Don't hesitate to call on me. Or, I'm sorry for whatever challenges might be lying ahead for you, but I'm here and willing to help. Would it be okay if I call you next week just to check in on you? Or, I'm sorry you're suffering right now, but I'm here with you and I'm willing to help. What can I do? Or, I'm sorry to hear about fill in the blank. I'm sure you're going to miss them terribly. How are you holding up? These phrases, or anyone you may come up with, more easily open into a larger conversation, while I'm sorry for your loss tends to shut them down. In some cases, it's appropriate to just remain silent and hopefully at some point in time, offer a heartfelt hug. Follow any of those with stories about the loved one, a story that you can tell, a favorite memory. And I must tell you, it's what comforted me most at the time of Peter's death. It actually provided an expanded sense of who he was because people who I didn't know had stories to share or pictures. And it allowed an immediate connection with that person who was sharing that story. Most importantly, be willing to listen and be present. In closing, I have a quote from Finding Meaning. You don't have to experience grief, but you can only avoid it by avoiding love. Love and grief are inextricably intertwined. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That was so stunning and so helpful. You just spoke right to the truth and right for the truth. And so I'm grateful for your contribution and for your hosting this conversation. So many good points. I'm sure you guys have a lot to share about your own grief and how you navigate it. So please stay on for the conversation because it would be great to hear from you. I'll pass it to Kathy Richardson.
Thank you. And thank you, Kate. That was so perfectly said. I always struggle with what to say and therefore never usually say anything because I just, so that's very helpful because we're all going through, we're all going through some kind of grief right now, whether it's the loss of a person or whatever it is. Anyway, this is a song I wrote. I'll just sing it. Oops. Sorry. I found a picture of you in the bottom of a drawer. I hardly recognized you, like I'd never seen your face before. You'd think that I would know you. It was such a long time ago. Things are different now. Sometimes I think about you and imagine where you are. You could be sitting right here or swinging from some distant star. And I hope that I would know you if I passed you in the crowd. Things are different now. Hey, would you like to fly in my balloon up in the sky? So many things that I could show you from up so high that you would not believe. You could see where I live. You could see where I spend my time. You could see the field we run through in my dreams. And you wouldn't have to wonder about the things you've never seen. And I wouldn't have to long to show you these things. Things are different now. Time erases faces, changes hearts and minds and dreams, peeling and revealing, stripping, wrapping out the seams, and things I once believed, now innocence I grieve. Hey, would you like to fly in my balloon up in the sky? So many things that I could show you from up so high that you would not believe. You could see where I live. You could see where I spend my time. You could see the field we run through in my dreams. And you wouldn't have to wonder about the things you've never seen. And I wouldn't have to long to show you these things. Things are different. Things are different now.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. You know, you don't ever have to worry about what to say, Kathy Richardson, because you could just sing a song.
Exactly. I'm like, stop talking. Just sing the damn song.
No, I'm saying
Does
like
it all.
when somebody's leaving, just show up and serenade them with one of your magnificent songs.
Thank
Gets
you.
to the heart every time. So thank you.
It's to make up for my bedhead.
But I'm the same way as you, Kathy. Sometimes when someone dies, I don't know what to say. And I have had the experience where I let one thing go for like 10 years before I talked to my friend's mom. I just couldn't even digest the idea. I didn't have the tools. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because when Peter was dying with Kate, I did feel like I don't know what to do, but we just ended up showing up anyhow, and we got to go over her house and have tea with her and sit in her yard and just stare at the grass. And sometimes that's what it looks like.
I just want to say that when my father was dying, you were impeccably there for me and my family. And,
Oh,
I will love you forever for that alone. I mean, it was huge the way you showed up for me during that time. So thank you.
oh, thank you, Kathy. Well, it's an honor when someone invites you into that close, corner. When somebody invites you into that, that's a real honor. So when you get invited to a funeral or a passing or a ceremony of someone's life, like, those are the things you want to show up for, because that's life, the life and birth moment. So I'm so glad that I could be there for you.